Hey, what's going on? Happy long weekend. This is the Leafs Convo for Oak Ridge Ford in London, Ontario. OakRidgeFord.com. It is Sunday, May 19th, 2024. Norm in London, Mike in Buffalo. Craig BERUBE is the new head coach of the Toronto Maple Leafs. There were some rumblings earlier this week. We weren't sure if it was just a bunch of bullshit or if there was something to it. Craig BERUBE, certainly a contender to take over the Leafs head coaching job. And then it came to be. It was really, really quick in that turnaround, Mr. Augello, in my opinion anyway. Good morning.
Good morning, Norm. Yeah, it was a week, but they apparently interviewed BERUBE the weekend following the firing of Sheldon Keefe. They also interviewed Todd McClellan. They also talked to Gerard Gallant. I get the feeling, because if you know, remember the timing, he was hired the day after Carolina was eliminated from the playoffs by the Rangers. I get the feeling maybe they checked in on Rod Brind'Amour, and once they found out Brind'Amour was signing a deal to stay in Carolina, that they jumped on BERUBE. I think Brind'Amour was potentially the best candidate out there, although there's some people who believe, like Joel Quenneville, but all those situations with the league, I don't know if the Leafs wanted to go through that. BERUBE is a good coach. I think we'll find out. He is not a big X's and O's guy. He's more of a motivational coach, but you can always have assistants that are, the tacticians. Right. I'm not down on the hiring. I'm not overly enthused, because it seems that the one thing that everybody points to is, well, he won a Stanley Cup with the Blues. He was a mid-season replacement. He was an assistant coach with the Blues. Lightning in a bottle. They had a great half season. Jordan Binnington came up from the American Hockey League and carried them to a Stanley Cup. He's a good coach and he's a good motivator, and maybe that's what this team needs right now. But I almost get the feeling there were some better coaches out there, but I'm not totally down on the hire.
Hey, this is the Leafs Convo for Oak Ridge Ford in London, Ontario. OakRidgeFord.com. This is where we're going to get your next vehicle, new, used, sedan, SUV, F-150. We really do appreciate the support from Oak Ridge Ford. It's going to be a big end of the month. If you're looking right now and you're especially into leasing, or if you would like to know more about leasing, the programs are just ridiculous. You can get yourself an amazing truck for a payment that you would typically make on like an entry-level vehicle. You just got to get at me. Norman.james@oakridgeford.com, at Norm@oakridgeford on Instagram. Are you pleased that the Leafs turned this around as quickly as they did? I mean, they had to feel like if Sheldon Keefe's team did not make it through to the second round, a firing was going to ensue. And I'm talking about the brass, anybody who has the ability to hire and fire. So a week later, Craig BERUBE is the guy. You kind of outlined some of the other possibilities. They were checking in on people and wondering about the status of certain individuals. But do you like the idea of them just kind of turning it around, finding a new head coach, and just getting on with it? Because to be honest, Mike, there's just, in the grand scheme of things, there's a lot more important stuff to contend with. Get the head coach hiring out of the way and move on, because there is so much to do.
Well, I agree with that. I mean, they took a week. It wasn't like they hired somebody the next day. If you remember, obviously they fired Babcock and moved Keefe up immediately from the American Hockey League. So there was a process and there was some investigation in this. That being said, again, like I said, I think he's a good coach. I think maybe he's not a hard ass, but he's sort of a motivator, and he's going to be somebody who will press some buttons.
But why Craig BERUBE? Why right now? I mean, there were other candidates out there, maybe X's and O's guys, maybe coaches with a little bit more of a contemporary pulse to the way they operate. Why Craig BERUBE?
I think they wanted the passion, the motivation. They wanted, obviously he's, very fresh from
Tony Robbins,
very fresh from being in the league. He was in St. Louis just this past season. He's well liked by his players, but it's also, he will motivate them. He will get them to, do what needs to be done. Now, okay, my issue here is, and I don't think this is going to be the case, but if it stops here, who cares? The roster needs to be changed.
Right.
You cannot, if this is, you bring Craig Berube in and you bring back the same band, no, it's not going to work. You've proven that this core group and this team, the way it was constructed, is not good enough.
Hey, Mike, Spike 11, Craig Berube is a huge upgrade on Keefe. Leafs are already much better. Do you think there was a sense of change that was required from those who make the decisions, and that if we can't move out the parts that a lot of fans would like to see moved out, and ideally we would like to as well, let's bring in somebody else who might be able to connect with this group better than the previous head coach?
Well, okay, I don't agree with the assessment that Berube is much better than Keefe. Keefe, again, was fired because he'd been here 5 years and he could not win with this group. I don't think any coach can win with this group. I don't think that this particular core group and this team as currently constructed can win. And they haven't. They won. The one time they won, they brought in Ryan O'Reilly and Luke Shen and Jake McCabe and Noel Achari. And, we keep going. I mean, they brought in 5, 6, 7 players and they won one round. This team as constructed cannot win in the playoffs. So you have to augment it. And I think that, they're going to try their level best. Now, they might not be able to. If we'll talk about the Tavares and Mitch Marner and other players. If they say I'm not waiving my no move clause, then they're going to have to. Craig Berube is going to have to work with the same ingredients. But you can tell Sheldon Keefe is well respected because he's getting interviewed by other teams. And Craig Berube got interviewed by New Jersey, by Toronto, by Winnipeg, right. And then he chose Toronto. Keefe has already been interviewed by New Jersey, but he's got the luxury of having a 2-year contract extension that hasn't even kicked in yet. And he could say, I'm going to sit back and, collect my money and take a year off with my family and then jump in next year. And he'll be a candidate and a lot of people will want him. So I don't think he's a bad coach. I think he simply could not win. It was after 5 years, maybe a little bit of tuning out, but he could not win with this group. But I don't think many people could.
What you're trying to say, Mike, is Craig Berube is just a replacement. He's simply a replacement. And if things don't change on the ice,
right,
these are decisions that Craig Berube might be able to add some influence to, suggest one thing or the other, either way. Nothing's going to change. So I get what you're saying. And this is why, Mike, you're usually subdued and it doesn't really matter the circumstance. I don't sense that you're going to be parading down the center street in Cheektowaga, banging drums over the hiring of Craig Berube. That said, maybe he does connect with whomever he has to coach later this year better than his predecessor. That remains to be seen. OG's Converse, thanks for being here with us. If you're in Canada, it's a long weekend and it's just absolutely gorgeous outside. So you're spending your time watching us. If you're going to watch us on the rebroad and you're doing that right now, thank you for being here. Like the content, subscribe to the channel. This is the Sunday Spectacular, where we are deeply rooted in our connection with you. Sometimes we do things during the week, sometimes we don't, but typically every single Sunday, it's myself, Mike, and you talking about the Maple Leafs. Alan, it doesn't matter who coaches the Leafs. The team is jinxed since '67. We had so many coaches and haven't won. Now Berube is our savior. Well, no, I don't think this is being positioned. The hiring is being positioned as, hey, here's the savior. Again, it's a replacement. Sheldon Keefe didn't wear out his welcome. He just didn't get the job done to a point where there's just so much pressure on this organization to make changes. He was the first change. Out he goes. Craig Berube's in, and again, there's just so much more to do.
Yeah, I get your point that he's just the next in the line. It's like, but sometimes changes from one good manager to another work. I mean, we saw. I think I'll use my example here. In the mid '90s, the Yankees had Buck Showalter. They made the playoffs. They decided to go another direction. They brought in a sort of recycled veteran guy who had been in St. Louis, who'd been with the Angels, who'd been with the Mets, and
it was his last chance too. That was Torre's last chance.
And Joe Torre was the right guy at the right time. Maybe Craig Berube is the right guy at the right time. At this point, right now, all this organization wants is to advance. Right. I mean, it's like, everybody wants them to win the Stanley Cup. Well, you got to win a round to have a chance. And they haven't been able to win a round in 7 of the last 8 years. So,
look at the teams that are winning rounds, Mike. The Leafs do not reflect those attributes at all.
No, and again, what I have been advocating and what I have been analyzing and looking at and crowing to till I'm out of breath is that this team was not correctly constructed from the get-go. Not to say, okay, you had star forwards. You had what they needed to do and they didn't do was they needed to get some of these players on bridge deals and not pay them as much so they could add the players and the positions that they needed. And then, like Chicago, like other teams with Kane and Taves, with the Blackhawks, they ended up paying them, but they won their Stanley Cups when they were either on their entry-level contracts or on their bridge deals. When they had to pay them $10 million plus, they didn't win. So that, you cannot pay 4 forwards over $10 million and expect to win. You need goaltending, you need defense. And that's what this team, they have had hole plugs and stop gaps over the last 4 or 5 years, and that doesn't friggin' work.
So Craig Berube is going to be a bystander right now. It could work out in his favor. It may not. I'm seeing a lot in the comments in the chat related to Marner potentially finding a different gear or a different player within himself because Craig Berube is now the head coach of the Maple Leafs. A connection potentially made between the two to extract what Mitch Marner has been lacking. The thing is, Marner's like a regular season dynamo. Why wouldn't he put up 95 to 100 points if fully healthy under any coach? It's what happens going forward in the playoffs. I just don't know how Craig Berube can grow Mitch Marner 2 inches and add another 30 pounds to him and turn him into Matt Tkachuk.
Yeah.
Like, do you think there's any merit to that potential relationship benefiting Marner?
I don't. I mean, Mitch Marner is what he is. He's 20. Right. I think he's 26 years old, going on 27, or he may be 27 already. Don't get me wrong. He's a great player. And if you have him surrounded by a bunch of physical players, and he doesn't have to do some of the things that this team needs him to do because they're paying him so much money, then he might be successful in another scenario. But here, he's not.
And the new head coach matters not, in your opinion?
No. I mean, I don't think Mitch Marner, like people seem to think Mitch Marner is like lacking motivation or lacking toughness or lacking, intestinal fortitude. He's just not that type of player. You cannot expect a guy who's 6 foot and 180 pounds to go to the front of the net and get his ass kicked. That's just not. That's not his game. And
sorry to interrupt. I want to get into a comment. Kawhi Leonard. How can you prove it doesn't work? You haven't seen it yet. Let Berube ignite Marner. He's so talented. If you trade the core, it will be a grave mistake. Leafs haters who don't bleed blue don't get it. Okay. I grant your point, Kawhi, about not wanting to give up on Marner for sure. But I just don't know what Craig Berube is going to get out of him that Marner hasn't already given.
Well, let me answer this because this is the dilemma. You might be right, but there's no proof that you are. He's been here since 2016.
Right.
He's had moments. He's had moments in the playoffs. Blocking the shot against Boston, the first round against Tampa, but in total, he has not been a performer in the postseason. You're one way away from him going to unrestricted free agency. Before July the 1st, you have to make the decision. You're signing him to a long-term extension, and you know what he's going to want. He's going to want more than Nylander, or you're or you ask him to waive his no-move clause, and you're trading him. Him burning off the final year of his contract to find out whether Berube can ignite him, that can't be. You have him locked up long term, or you're moving him. There is no middle. They cannot, it may not be up to him. It may not be up to the Leafs. If he says I'm not going anywhere, and they don't want to sign him, then he burns off the final year. And knowing the Leafs, he'll score 95 points, do great in the playoffs, and then walk away for nothing. They have to either get something for him or commit to him. There is no middle ground.
I don't think Marner's future and the arrival of Craig Berube are related, other than as of now they're both employed with the Toronto Maple Leafs. Like Craig Berube was not hired to find another gear in Mitch Marner and have him unfurl that to the world. He is here because Sheldon Keefe didn't get this team into the second round. He was available. And looking back on his brief head coaching tenure with the St. Louis Blues, because again, he had the Flyers previous to that, but I mean, he did have two 40-point seasons after he took over and won that Stanley Cup. 49-win season in 21-22 when going into the second round of the playoffs. So it's a coach who's been in the playoffs, and he's a motivational guy. And Craig Berube is in a lot of ways still lucky to be in the game. I mean, he was a bruiser, right? Lots of penalty minutes, throwing fisticuffs. A different kind of guy who has an appreciation for everything that he's been given and everything he's waded through and fought through in his career. And so, maybe that dynamic helps the team in general. Maybe there's a connection there that was lacking with Sheldon Keefe. And not to say it's going to make any appreciable difference, but, that fresh face and somebody who's been through the battles, not just, in playing hockey in the 80s and 90s, but as a fighter and a guy who was, basically one punch to the temple away from having his career ended, still being here and being successful and now coaching the biggest team in hockey. I mean, there could be something to that.
Well, I'll say this. I think Craig Berube, the style of play and the type of player that he likes is along the same lines as Brad Treliving. Treliving, we've been saying it since Treliving was hired. He likes big defensemen. He brought in Bertuzzi. He brought in, I don't think Ryan Reeves was a good hire, but he wanted to bring in an enforcer to help sort of protect his player. He likes players with size. He also likes skill, but if he likes players with size. And Berube, if you look at the team that won in 2019, with guys like Sammy Blais and big defensemen like Pietrangelo and Parayko and Edmondson, who I think Berube coming back will affect the Leafs potentially bringing back Edmondson on a contract. He likes players with size. He likes players that play sort of that rambunctious, energetic style. And Patrick Maroon was on that team. So, what I'm saying is I think that's the type of team that Brad Treliving likes, and that seems to be the type of team that Craig Berube likes to coach. So that's the team that I think that in the offseason, Brad Treliving will try his utmost to try to assemble to accentuate the coach that he brought in.
Having Craig Berube as the head coach, are you expecting this team, like you've alluded to it slightly, but are you expecting this team to just project more toughness straight across the board, getting motivated and wanting to go out there and maybe hit somebody, and then, with any alterations or additions or, inflations of certain players' egos? Do you think that, this team will skate a little taller and a little broader with Craig Berube on the bench?
I think they have to, and I think that they'll. Now, read the landscape of the Atlantic Division right now. Okay, you lost to a team in Boston who had two star players, but what did they have? Maybe more of. They had better goaltending, and they had more team toughness and defensive responsibility throughout the lineup. Okay, they lost to that team. the team that is ruling the roost in this division right now is the Florida Panthers. Sam Bennett is punching Brad Marchand, sucker punching him. They got Lombard, they got Kachuk, they've got Ekblad. They project team toughness. They have tough players. They have size.
Right.
But they also have skill. They also have a lot of skill, and that's going to be tough to match up to. But look at the landscape in this division. Buffalo fires Don Granato, brings in Lindy Ruff, and what will they be looking at in the summer? Adding quality depth and toughness. They've got the goaltending. They've got young goaltending. Their defense is decent. Maybe they needed to add a bottom pairing guy, but they're going to do most of their additions to bringing in veteran players into the bottom six, and maybe if they can into the top six. Toronto is going to be they're going to be battling Buffalo for maybe the same players. They're going to be fighting over guys like Scott Lawton in the trade market, or, maybe free agents like Brett Pesce or Zadora. I mean, that, we don't know what direction the Leafs are going to go in terms of free agency and trades, because we don't know how much cap space they're going to have. But that is the direction that I believe they are going to go, and they have to go, because they keep getting beaten by better defensive, better goaltending, and tougher teams.
It's incredible, Mike. We're talking about teams changing the way they envision their success and changing it due to a lack of toughness that is propelling them forward. It was how many years ago when guys like Kyle Dubas were put in place to not only change his team, but potentially be the forebearer of a new movement in hockey where it's speed, skill, size didn't really matter. Fighting was out. Physical contact was going to be limited. And what happened to that?
Well, okay.
What happened to it? It was supposed to be the way the game was going to go.
Well, this is a fast game. So I think in part Dubas was right.
And I'm not shitting on Dubas.
I know, but what I'm saying is you have to, okay, maybe it's my background of being trained and as an educator. When you are training students, you have to sort of approach things in many different ways, because kids learn in many different ways. A hockey team cannot be just one thing. It can't be all skill. It can't be all defense. It can't be just goaltending. It has to be all those things.
Right.
And that is if you look at Florida, they have Bobrovsky, a top flight goaltender. They're deep defensively 1 through 6. They went out and made, they've got their core guys, but they also have brought in Ekman Larson at a reduced cost, and Kulikov. They have good veteran bottom pairing guys. Then at forward, they trade for Tarasenko. They have levels of talent. And that's what you need. Now, this team, the Leafs, if their core guys don't play well, they don't win. And in this series against Boston, Matthews missed because of concussion issues or whatever the hell it was. Nylander missed 3 games because of migraines. Marner did not play well early in the series. Tavares, I think he played well, but he didn't produce.
Right.
So all these things, they lose the goaltender they would start in Game 7 because of a sore back. All these things. Now, teams like Vancouver, they've overcome that. They're in Game 7 of the second round with Artur Silovs as their starting goaltender, and Thatcher Demko, their all-star, hasn't played since the first round.
Right.
That, you need to overcome these things. And how do you overcome that? By levels, by stratifications of talent. And this team, and by different types of talent. And this team they have too much of one and not enough of another.
At the end of the day, management, coaches, whomever is in charge of putting together a team is only as good as the players it selects, and it propagates and promotes and adds to a lineup night in and night out. And this core 4, while not full failure in the grand scheme of things, has just not gotten it done. So let's be honest, OGs and converts, it's time to break this damn thing up. The issue is that timing is really poor in this scenario, because the chances of Brad Treliving breaking it up and doing right by the player, but ultimately right by the organization is going to be very, very, very difficult. They got to give Bill Zito credit in Florida, though. Mike, who the hell is this guy, and how the hell did he build a team like that while we are still laboring here?
He was an agent. He was an assistant GM, I think, in Philadelphia. And he's a really smart guy. I mean, I don't know him personally, but I know people who know him, and they foresaw him being a good general manager, and he has really done a great job there. Now, Florida's got a lot of free agents, and some of them may be on the market, so this may be a one and done, or they're going to have to augment that roster because of right. But he's done a great job. I'll just say this, because a lot of the talk has been over the last week. There was a piece by Chris Johnston in The Athletic interviewing Tavares about the switch over to Craig Berube. And I saw one of the commenters say, how could you not ask him about waiving his no movement clause?
Right.
I mean, okay, Leaf fans have to understand this. Now, with Mitch Marner being in his mid-20s and 1 year away from unrestricted free agency, and facing the gauntlet of what Toronto media and Toronto fans may be putting on him next year, he may just say, peace out. I'll waive my no movement clause if I can go to a certain place where I can get an 8-year deal, and maybe you can get a good deal with, okay, I'm open to that. We don't know whether that's the case. That's between Treliving and Darren Ferris. John Tavares has got 1 year left in his contract. He's going to be 34 years old, start, I think, in September. He's not going anywhere. He told them last year. He told the media last year, I don't want to go anywhere. I cannot imagine him as team captain. First of all, I can't imagine them stripping the captaincy of him. Why would you do that? You want to alienate every potential free agent that could come to Toronto in the next few years. You strip the captaincy of a good guy who's a good leader. He's just not the vocal rah sis boom ba leader. If you want to alienate and make this organization's reputation be mud, then try to force John Tavares out of Toronto. It's asinine, and they should not fucking do it.
That the mosaic of Leaf fans is very diverse. There are a lot of lunatics who are a part of this fan base, and because of the way things have transpired year in and year out, without any kind of sense of we're almost there and we can taste it, it's coming, just be a little more patient. They think with their heart and not their heads, right? John Tavares signed a contract back in 2018. He intends to fulfill his contract. The notion of him laying down his sword and saying, yeah, you know what? I'll leave here because I'm connected to what you guys see as, a lack of success, and I'll just move on. Let's just be like, again, there's the emotion of everything that's going on, but there is the reality. And I think we have to kind of move away from John Tavares being implicated in all the things that we're so upset about, and just let him be who he needs to be, and let Brad Treliving do his best to modify, augment, improve this organization, potentially worsen it for a time being in order to make it better going forward. The head coach is in place, Mike. There's going to be other changes to come. Speaking of changes, Easton Cowan has gone from a guy who's a first-round pick and who looked really good and looked like he had tons of potential to like the biggest star in junior hockey right now, won the OHL MVP and the playoff MVP, leading the Knights to a OHL championship. What is it, their 5th or 6th? And they're off to another Memorial Cup. The last one they won, I was at in 2016 with Mitch Marner and the boys, and Matt Tkachuk.
And
Christian Dvorak for sure, winning the whole thing. And good luck to the London Knights, the local team right here. But man, oh man, Easton Cowan's coming on fast and furious. That is something that Maple Leaf fans can divert their attention to. Everything that's going on with him, his trials and tribulations in this national tournament, and for a couple of minutes, get positive about what's to come.
Well, it's funny because the sort of deal that sort of was underneath the the radar at the deadline last year was trading off Rasmus Sandin to Washington for a late first-round pick, Boston's first-round pick, which turned out to be Easton Cowan. And I was at the draft, and when I go to the draft, I hang out and with a lot of scouting and draft people, and they didn't know who Easton Cowan was. I mean, it's like remember, he had a great second half of the year with London and a great OHL playoffs. And, they knew, maybe that's overstating. They knew who he was, but they projected him. A lot of people projected him as a second, third, fourth round draft pick. So I give Wes Clark and I give the Leafs scouting people a ton of credit because, not only has he he's exceeded expectation by leaps and bounds. I mean, he had that long point streak with the Knights. He made Team Canada for the World Junior. Now he's won the Tilson for the MVP and now the Gretzky for the playoff MVP, and he's going to go to the Memorial Cup. I mean, honestly, I think there's an outside chance, but not, it will depend on how he plays at training camp. But he's at a position where, he'll be 19 at training camp.
Right.
So that might be too young, but what may he be able to accomplish in another year in junior? And he cannot play in the American Hockey League. So It's either play for London or play for the Leafs, give him the 10 games and take a look. Yeah. I mean, but they're being put in that position because he has exceeded so many expectations with a great season.
And that's a similar position to Mitch Marner's back in 2017, 18, whenever, 19.
Yeah.
We suggested that maybe Marner needed another year to just absolutely dominate, grow, and let the first group of this new generation of Leafs kind of warm the situation for him. And then we got crapped on by his father saying we are not supportive of Mitch Marner. If you guys can dig that up through SoundCloud, find it somewhere, Leafs Convo SoundCloud. Mr. Truman do you guys see Cowan being a potential replacement for Marner as soon as next year, if Marner is moved, that is?
That's putting a lot of pressure on him. And what I'll say is this, and remember, the difference here was Marner was drafted in 2015, the same draft as McDavid. The Leafs were tanking that year. So they decided we're not going to expose him to the NHL, and he could be good enough to help us win games that we don't want to win. So they kept him in London. He won a Memorial Cup. He dominated the league, and he came in as a 19-year-old, maybe even as a 20-year-old. I don't know what his birth date is, but he came in and with Matthews, with Nylander, with Zach Hyman. And it was a much better developmental model. Now Cowan was an 18-year-old. I think he's still an 18-year-old. I don't think he turns 19 until the fall. Somebody can check the birth date on that one. But, he last year in training camp, you could see.
He's 19. He'll be 19 tomorrow.
Okay. So he'll be a 19-year-old in training camp. As an 18-year-old in training camp, he didn't look out of place. But the one thing he was, he's not a totally big guy. But he's different than Marner in terms of he goes to dirty areas. He's sandpapery. He's got a little Darcy Tucker in him, not the fighting part, but not the checking part, but the sandpaper stuff. And maybe he's another Logan Stankoven. Maybe he's a guy who goes, or a Wyatt Johnston who goes into the NHL as a 19-year-old and can be successful. You can hope that, but you can't depend on that. So if he comes to training camp and exceeds expectations and he makes the team, that's great. But you cannot plan on that because you don't know what's going to be. And you have to plan for the possibility that, okay, you play him 10 games and you let him go back to London. And maybe that'll be the best thing for the kid. And he goes to the World Juniors again next year. But, we'll see. But they can't depend on that is what I'm saying.
Right. OG's Conference, what say you? Have your say in the chat and also in community. YouTube.com/Leafs-Convo/community. I caught the Knights and the Flint Firebirds last month in the first round of the OHL playoffs, and the Firebirds were all over Cowan, just grabbing him, pushing him, and he was smothered by them. And what I was impressed with is his tenacity and his pushback. not to the degree where he was taking stupid penalties, but he's like, screw this, I don't care. Come at me, bro. It's all good. I know who I am on this ice. I know my importance. You do too. You're going to try to take me down, and I'm going to find a way to avoid being taken down while putting some biscuits in the basket and ending your playoff dreams, which he did. And he and the Knights are still standing on their way to the Memorial Cup. We're almost into the Final Four, Mike. Vancouver and Edmonton have to sort out their differences. We shall find out which one of those teams moves on. I know there's one team you will not be rooting for, and they have orange and blue in the color of their logo. Why do you hate Edmonton so much?
Oh, I mean, it just goes back to the '80s. It goes back to Gretzky and Messier, and yeah, I never liked the team. I mean, they've got extremely talented players. I mean, McDavid is the best; he's one of the best players in the league, and Draisaitl is fantastic. But they're sort of built along the lines of the Leafs. They're a top-heavy team.
Is there resentment in this?
No, well, no, not resentment. It's just they're a top. I think that my only resentment is their lack of recognition, sort of like Toronto, where they're structuring their team with, okay, Nugent Hopkins, McDavid, and Draisaitl up top. But when they added players, they didn't add the defensemen that they needed to win. They added Kane, and they added Hyman, and they added Jack Campbell, who was not a good enough goaltender, who after 1 year, they're going to Stuart Skinner. They're just a stupid organization, and I don't want stupidity to be rewarded. So
even with Ken Holland there?
Ken Holland, he got Ekholm, and they drafted Evan Bouchard. It may have been the previous administration that did, but he's a fine defenseman. So they've got 3 good defensemen, and then they have 3 bad defensemen. If you have Cody Ceci on your blue line, it's bad. They have half a defense. They don't have a great goaltender, and they have a supreme talent who has wasted the first 7 years of his career in Edmonton, sort of like some other players that were drafted in 2015. Right. And I know that Leaf fans out there are hoping that they don't win for the possibility that McDavid comes in a couple years. Don't hold your breath on that one, but until it doesn't happen, I'm sure Leaf fans will be saying, "Oh, 97 in blue and white."
Well,
that'll be great.
Talk about, again, not to get too far ahead of ourselves. Will they have the money? We're already talking about devoting too much money to too few players. Wouldn't that be part of the scenario?
After next year, $22 million drops off if they don't trade them. So I mean, who knows? So, but in terms of the other teams, I picked the Rangers and Dallas to make the Stanley Cup final. I'm sticking with that, and obviously because they're both alive still. The Rangers Florida is going to be a wild series. I think that the Rangers have the goaltending to beat Florida. Boston did not have enough firepower to beat them, but they got the goaltending out of Swayman. But I think the Rangers have enough defensive ability, enough toughness, and enough scoring ability to beat them. But it's going to be tough. Florida is really good. And Dallas, I picked Dallas to come out of the West, and whoever wins Game 7 on Monday between Vancouver and Edmonton will be going down to the Stars. So
the thing with the Oilers, though, Mike, looking back on Connor McDavid being the centerpiece of that organization, he's been to the second round 4 times, the third round once. Mm-hmm. So drawing parallels between the Maple Leafs and the Oilers has to stop at the playoffs.
Yeah, but
the Oilers have had. If the Leafs had had this kind of success, this group, if they had played this many playoff games, would Kyle Dubas be gone? Would Sheldon Keefe be gone? Would we still be disparaging Mitch Marner the way we do? Right?
But they play in the Pacific Division. They don't play in a division where Tampa Bay made how many cup finals in a row? 3. Boston made a cup final in 2019. Florida made a cup final in 2023. And the Leafs played those teams in most of those years. It's the toughness of the Atlantic Division, which is the reason why I'm in favor of a conference playoff format instead of a divisional playoff format. That is a factor. If they'd been playing Calgary or Los Angeles, give me the LA Kings, and that guarantees you a first round win every single friggin' time.
Right.
So that is a factor.
Anything else you want to cover? What's going on at hockeybuzz.com?
Oh, we're just looking at. Well, we'll be waiting for the press conference on Tuesday, and yeah, I mean, I love the Maple Leafs and I love their PR staff. They released the Berube information at 5 p.m. on Friday on a long weekend. Sort of I don't know about to bury the news, but and now obviously Monday is a national holiday, so they won't be having the press conference until Tuesday. So we have to wait another couple days before we get to see and talk with Craig Berube.
I wonder how motivational he's going to get in front of the Toronto media.
You know what? Knowing him being a veteran guy, I can't imagine him doing a Dan Campbell and being rah spoon ba and like talk about like, you know, I'll cut off my leg or knee. You know, he's smart enough not to do that, and I think the fan base is smart enough not to buy that line. Just go in there and say my goal is to win, you know,
right.
and that'll be enough. If he can, everybody will love him.
And is there another thing that we should all prepare for on the radar in terms of a Maple Leaf move that should garner anticipation?
Well, I mean, I think you could see some interesting assistant coaching hires. There's been some rumors of Mark Savard, the former NHLer who was an assistant coach in Calgary, maybe coming over and being on Berube's staff. It'll be interesting to see how many of the assistants from Sheldon Keefe's group he decides to keep. I don't remember the buyout window doesn't start until after the Stanley Cup final, which would be late June. So I don't see any buyouts, and honestly, I don't see any. I don't see them asking. I don't see a trade of Tavares or Riley. I think if there's going to be a change in the core, it's going to be Marner, and that's not going to happen probably until close to the draft.
Hey, while the NHL Stanley Cup playoff Final Four gets ramped up, the Maple Leafs and their fan base are anticipating the introduction of another head coach. Wouldn't it be nice if we were at this point of a year and the Leafs were playing while other teams were sorting out their head offices and reorganizing for the future? Maybe one day, Mr. Augello, maybe one day. Like the content, guys. Subscribe to the channel. Thanks so much for all of your support. The Leafs Convo is hitting numbers and metrics that we've never hit before. It's all because of you. And, you know, a little bit because of us. We're producing content, and we have so much more to come in the days, weeks, and months ahead. For Mr. Augello, I'm Mr. James. Thanks for being here. Enjoy your long weekend. Have a great time. We'll probably see you sometime this week. The Leafs Convo is out.